It was supposed to be just an ordinary birthday. But then I received a letter that shattered everything. I was switched at birth, living my whole life with strangers pretending to be my parents. I never liked my birthday. Not because I hated getting older, or because I hated the attention. It just never felt right. Every year, July 17th would roll around, and I'd get this gnawing sensation in my stomach, like my body knew something my brain didn't. My parents would make a big deal out of it, invite family over, hang streamers and balloons with my name plastered across them. But even as a kid, I'd catch myself watching from the corner of the room, disconnected, like a guest at someone else's party. This year was no different. I turned 24, and my mom insisted on throwing me a little something, which, in her language, meant a full-on suburban barbecue with too much food and my dad's awkward stories. I was used to playing along, pretending to laugh, pretending I belonged. But then something weird happened. After everyone left, and my mom was washing dishes, she called me over. She handed me a small, weathered envelope. No return address, just my name written in shaky cursive. "This came in the mail yesterday," she said. Weird timing. I opened it, expecting a card from an estranged aunt or some church friend I didn't remember. Instead, I pulled out a single folded sheet of paper. Typed. No signature. It said, "You were switched at birth. July 17th is not your birthday. Your real parents live 28 miles away. They've been looking for you." That was it. No name. No explanation. Just that. I looked up at my mom, trying to read her face. She wasn't watching me, just scrubbing a plate like her life depended on it. "You okay?" she asked without turning. Yeah, I lied. I folded the paper back up and slipped it into my pocket. I didn't sleep that night. I spent hours staring at the ceiling, thinking about all the strange things that never made sense. Why I had green eyes and neither of my parents did. Why I was taller than everyone in my family. Why my baby photos started only around 5 months old. Why my mom had always looked nervous when people commented on how different I looked. At 3:14 a.m., I got out of bed. I opened my laptop, and I started looking, searching. Birth records, hospital names. I remembered the name of the hospital my mom always said I was born in, St. Joseph's, a small place in a neighboring town that had long since shut down. I dug into forums, Reddit threads, Facebook groups for adoption stories, lost relatives, medical mix-ups. Then, at 4:02 a.m., I found something. A Reddit thread titled, "Looking for my son who was switched at birth in 2001, St. Joseph's Hospital." The post was dated 2 years ago. A user named HopefulFather01 described a nightmarish story, a nurse's confession on her deathbed, a hospital cover-up, a pair of babies taken home by the wrong families. One of the babies, a boy, was never found. The other had tragically died in infancy. The parents who were left behind never gave up looking. He included one detail that sent chills down my spine. "We think he was born on July 15th, not the 17th. That was the day we last held him." July 15th. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I checked the envelope again. The postmark said July 16th. No location, just the date. Whoever sent that letter knew exactly what they were doing. And I was about to find out if my whole life had been a lie. I spent the next day in a fog. I went to work, nodded through meetings, smiled at people without remembering what they were saying. All I could think about was that Reddit post. The words, "We never stopped looking," looped through my brain like a haunting refrain. I didn't respond to the post, not yet. I needed more. More proof. More something. I wasn't ready to blow up my entire life on the hunch of a desperate man with a Reddit account. But that didn't mean I could let it go. I started digging deeper into HopefulFather01. His post history was mostly silent, except for one thread where he commented on a true crime discussion about hospital negligence. In that comment, he mentioned a name, Daniel Whitaker. Said it was the name of the attorney who helped them dig into the hospital records years after the event. That was my next lead. I called in sick the following day and drove out to a library in the same county where St. Joseph's had been. Their public archives had some old newspaper clippings on microfilm, including an article from 2002 about a family suing the now-defunct hospital over the death of their newborn. The article was about a couple, Ethan and Michelle Parker. They had lost their son, but always believed something wasn't right. Nurses were evasive. Records were incomplete. One nurse quit the day after their son died. They believed, even back then, that their baby had been switched with another, but had no proof. The hospital called them delusional. The lawsuit went nowhere. But I remembered the name. Ethan Parker. I typed it into Facebook. Nothing helpful. Then I tried Michelle Parker. There were too many results, until I narrowed it down by location. A Michelle Parker from a town called Norwalk, 30 minutes from where I grew up. I clicked her profile and froze. Her profile picture was a family photo. A smiling woman, about mid-40s, brown hair streaked with gray. Beside her stood a man I assumed was Ethan. But it wasn't them that made my blood run cold. It was the boy between them. Or, not a boy exactly. A young man, maybe 22. He was tall, lanky, pale skin, same high cheekbones, same chin, same eyes. He looked exactly like me. Not kind of. Not similar. He looked like I'd been duplicated and aged down 2 years. I stared at the picture so long that my laptop screen dimmed. I clicked through a few of their public posts. Birthday celebrations. A graduation from a small liberal arts college. His name was Miles Parker. So this is what happened, I thought. I was supposed to be Miles Parker. And Miles? He was supposed to be me. He was living the life that belonged to me. With my parents. My name. My face. I slammed my laptop shut and just sat there in my room, breathing hard. It felt like someone had scooped out my insides and replaced them with wet concrete. Everything I thought I knew, my parents, my family, me, was hanging in midair. Fragile. Suspended. And I didn't know if I wanted to smash it or protect it. Eventually, curiosity won. I drove. No GPS. Just a scribbled address I found from a public records search. It took me 40 minutes through winding residential neighborhoods before I reached their house. It was bigger than ours. Nicer lawn. American flag hanging above the porch. A basketball hoop over the garage. I parked half a block away. Just watched. And that's when he came outside. Miles. In the flesh. He was holding a trash bag, headed for the garbage can by the curb. Moved just like me. Wore a hoodie in the same way I did. Hands in the pockets, hunching forward. He even had the same nervous tick I have when I think no one's watching, rubbing his thumb against the edge of his palm. I couldn't stop staring. It was like watching a version of myself I'd never become. Then his dad, Ethan Parker, opened the front door. Said something I couldn't hear. They laughed. Miles dropped the bag, walked back inside. Gone. And I was left there, parked in the shadows, heart hammering against the steering wheel like I'd seen a ghost. Except the ghost was me. And the life I never got. The next morning, I couldn't sleep. The image of Miles, that other me, was burned into my mind. Who was he, really? Did he know? Was he just some kid living a normal life? Or did he feel the weight of what had happened? I needed answers. I started by searching for Ethan Parker, the father. No social media accounts under that name, but a quick Google search brought up a law firm in a nearby city, Parker and Associates. Could it be? The same last name, the same town, and a law firm? I called the number listed, pretending to be a client. A polite woman answered and said Mr. Parker was in a meeting but could schedule a consultation. I booked it. My heart pounded the whole way to the office. I wasn't sure if I was walking into closure or a nightmare. When Ethan Parker stepped into the room, I was surprised. He looked like someone who'd spent his life carrying a secret heavier than most. Lines around his eyes, a face that was weathered but kind. I introduced myself, careful to keep my tone steady. I think we have a connection, I said. He blinked slowly, then nodded. I figured this day would come. It was like he'd been waiting for me. He told me about the lawsuit, how he and Michelle had suspected the hospital switched babies, but the evidence was thin. He said after the trial, they lost everything. His wife sank into depression. They moved to Norwalk to start over. Then came the bombshell. There's more, he said. Miles, he's been through a lot too. We never told him the full story. He doesn't even know he was switched. My head was spinning. How do you live with that? I asked. Ethan's eyes glistened with tears. Every day's a struggle. We just want to protect him. You too. He slid me a thin envelope. Medical records, birth certificates, legal documents. Proof that the hospital had lied. That 2 babies had been swapped. That the real me was raised by people who thought they were doing the right thing, and Miles by a family desperate for a fresh start. I sat back, overwhelmed. Then Ethan leaned forward, voice dropping. There's one thing you need to know. Your parents, they've been keeping something from you. Something about why the switch happened. It wasn't just a mistake. I wanted to shout at him to stop, but I couldn't. He promised to tell me everything, but only if I met him and Michelle. Face to face. I hesitated. Part of me was terrified. What if this destroyed everything I thought I was? But another part, the part that had been chasing shadows, knew I had to know. I agreed. Meeting Ethan and Michelle was like stepping into a parallel universe, one I never imagined existed. Their modest home in Norwalk was warm, filled with photos of a boy I'd only just learned was my biological brother, Miles. Michelle greeted me with cautious kindness, her eyes revealing years of sorrow, and resilience. Ethan's quiet strength was steady, but I sensed the weight they both carried. They began to tell the story, a story I wasn't prepared for. The hospital switch wasn't an accident. It was deliberate. According to Ethan, there had been corruption in the hospital administration, a secret deal that went wrong, or maybe right for someone else. They suspected the switch was made to cover a scandal involving the real Miles' birth mother, a wealthy and powerful woman who didn't want the child. My parents, apparently, had been involved, not in a criminal way, but caught in the middle. They were told to keep quiet, to protect everyone's reputations, and promised they would have their son back eventually. But years passed, and nothing changed. I listened, stunned, as the picture of my real life shattered and reshaped in front of me. What hurt the most wasn't just the betrayal, it was the silence. My parents had never told me the truth. Michelle's voice cracked as she admitted how much she wanted me to meet Miles, to connect with the brother I never knew I had. But Ethan warned me. Miles was fragile, struggling with identity issues, and not ready to face this reality fully. I felt torn. On one hand, I longed to know this brother, to find my place in this tangled family web. On the other, I was afraid that everything I'd built, the life I'd fought for, might fall apart. Before I left, Ethan handed me a sealed letter from my parents. "I think it's time you read it," he said. Back in my car, hands trembling, I opened the envelope. Inside was a letter from my mother, an apology, a confession, and a plea for forgiveness. She wrote about the fear she felt, the pressure from powerful people, and how she'd hoped to tell me someday. How she loved me, but was trapped. I sat there, overwhelmed. Everything I thought I knew was a lie, or at least incomplete. And yet, deep inside, something stirred. A new purpose. To uncover the full truth. To find Miles. To demand answers. But I had no idea just how dangerous that would become. The days after reading my mother's letter blurred into a whirlwind of questions I couldn't shake. Who else knew? Who else was involved? And why had they all been so desperate to keep this secret buried? I started digging, quietly at first, calling old family friends, searching public records, and piecing together fragments of the story. Every lead only deepened the mystery. There were whispers of deals made behind closed doors, whispers of money changing hands, and threats made in hushed tones. One afternoon, while going through a box of my father's old papers, I found something chilling. A file marked "Private, Do Not Open." Inside were documents hinting at an agreement between my parents and a powerful local figure, a man named Charles Benton. Benton's name kept popping up in connection with scandals and cover-ups. It felt like the walls of my world were closing in, and I hadn't even scratched the surface. Then came the call. An unknown number flashed on my phone. I hesitated, then answered. "Stop digging," a cold voice warned. "You don't know what you're getting into." Before I could respond, the line went dead. That night, I found my car keyed. The word "liar" scratched deep across the driver's side door. Fear mingled with anger, but it only fueled my resolve. If they wanted me to stop, they had no idea who they were dealing with. I decided it was time to meet Charles Benton face to face. If he was the key to everything, I needed answers, no matter the cost. But the deeper I delved, the more I realized this wasn't just about a stolen identity. It was a web of lies, betrayal, and power struggles that threatened to destroy everything I held dear. And somehow, it all circled back to my family. The next morning, with my heart pounding like a drum, I drove to the outskirts of town where Charles Benton's estate loomed, a sprawling mansion that screamed wealth and power. The kind of place where secrets were buried beneath marble floors and guarded by silent men in black suits. I told myself this was just a meeting, nothing more. But deep down, I knew this could change everything, or end it. The gates swung open before I even reached them, and a stern-faced man ushered me inside without a word. The house was colder than I imagined, sterile and intimidating. Charles Benton himself appeared, sharp suit, cold eyes, and a smile that didn't reach them. "So you're the one stirring up the past," he said, voice low and dangerous. I steadied myself. "I want to know what you and my parents were hiding." His smile twisted. "Your parents made choices to protect their family. Sometimes sacrifices have to be made." I shook my head. "Sacrifices don't mean lying, cheating, and tearing families apart." He laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. "You have no idea what's at stake." That's when he dropped the bombshell. My parents owed him more than just favors. They were entangled in debts and promises that could ruin everyone if exposed. And worse, David, my brother, was far deeper in this mess than I ever imagined. "You're playing a dangerous game," Benton warned. "Step back, or you'll lose everything." As I left the estate, his words echoed in my mind. But backing down wasn't in my nature anymore. Not after everything. I knew one thing for sure. This war was just beginning. The ride home felt longer than usual. My mind raced, replaying every word Benton said. Debt, promises, lies, things I never wanted to be involved with. But family meant more than money, more than secrets. I had to dig deeper. That night, I sat down with old photo albums and faded letters I'd taken from my parents' study before they passed. My fingers trembled as I turned each page, searching for answers. Then I found it. A letter, sealed with a strange insignia I didn't recognize. It was a contract between my parents and a shadowy company called Sterling Holdings. The terms were vague, but it was clear they promised something valuable in exchange for money. I knew instantly that this was the key to everything. Sterling Holdings. I had heard the name before. Rumors of a ruthless corporate empire that crushed anyone who got in their way. The more I read, the heavier the weight on my chest became. My family's fortune, their legacy, was tied to these dangerous people. And David, he wasn't just reckless, he was tangled in their web. The next day, I confronted my Aunt Linda, the only relative who seemed neutral. She hesitated but eventually admitted that David had borrowed money from Sterling Holdings, desperate to fund his failing ventures. When he couldn't pay, they threatened to take everything. They pressured Mom and Dad to include you in the will, hoping you'd bail him out, she said quietly. But your parents refused. My anger boiled over. David's selfishness had nearly destroyed us all. But now it was clear, this wasn't just family drama. It was a fight for survival. I realized I had to act fast before Sterling Holdings came knocking on my door. The phone call came late at night, no caller ID. My heart sank before I even answered. A cold, unfamiliar voice spoke slowly, deliberately. You're meddling where you don't belong, Alex. Sterling Holdings doesn't like interference. Back off, or the consequences won't just be financial. I sat frozen, every muscle tense. This was no empty threat. Over the next few days, strange things started happening. My car was keyed overnight. Anonymous messages slipped under my door, warning me to stop digging. Even my phone was tapped. I could hear faint static and distant voices when I called my lawyer. But instead of backing down, something inside me hardened. My parents had fought hard to protect our legacy. I wouldn't let a shadowy corporation and a greedy brother tear it apart. I decided to meet with a private investigator. His name was Marcus, grizzled, no nonsense, and rumored to have a few Sterling cases under his belt. Marcus told me things I wished I hadn't heard. Sterling Holdings was known for ruining lives, lawsuits, intimidation, even violence. But they never expected a quiet, methodical fighter like me. I'll dig up everything I can on David's dealings, Marcus promised. And the company itself. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope. I wasn't alone in this battle. But the clock was ticking. I knew David wasn't just my brother anymore. He was my enemy. And Sterling Holdings was ready to crush anyone standing in their way. Days turned into restless nights as Marcus dove into the murky depths of Sterling Holdings and David's hidden world. I watched as files, photos, and confidential documents slowly piled up on my dining table, each piece painting a darker picture than I'd imagined. David wasn't just reckless or selfish. He was tangled in a web of deceit that stretched far beyond family drama. Offshore accounts, suspicious property deals, fake companies. The deeper Marcus dug, the more it became clear. David had been siphoning money from the family estate long before our parents disowned him. One evening, Marcus showed me a photo, David shaking hands with a man I recognized as a notorious corporate shark, someone known for crushing smaller rivals and buying silence with threats. That's when it hit me. I told Marcus quietly. David wasn't just trying to get ahead. He was sabotaging everything to make sure I wouldn't inherit a dime. But that wasn't all. There were whispers of illegal activities, money laundering, bribery, even rumors of threats against my parents when they started questioning his actions. I couldn't believe the brother I once knew was capable of such darkness. Yet, here was the proof, staring me in the face. Despite the fear gnawing at me, I felt a strange surge of determination. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about justice. For my parents. For the truth. I called Karen, who was quieter than usual. We need to talk, I said, my voice steady but heavy. She hesitated, then whispered, Alex, there's something you should know. Her confession opened a new door of secrets. Ones that would challenge everything I thought I knew about my family and force me to confront not just David, but the shadows lurking in all of us. Karen's voice trembled as she began to reveal what she'd been hiding. Alex, I didn't want to hurt you, but David pressured me. He said if I didn't go along with his plan, he'd ruin everything. Your job, your reputation, even your relationship with your son. I sat there, stunned. The man I once called my brother was playing a game so cruel. It almost felt unreal. She told me how David had manipulated her for months, gaslighting her, whispering lies about me, isolating her from everyone who cared. And worst of all, how he'd convinced her to fake the paternity test results to make me doubt my own son's identity. I was scared, Alex. I felt trapped. But the moment you left, I started questioning everything. That's when I found the real test results hidden in David's office. My heart pounded as Karen pulled out an envelope, worn and folded, containing the truth. The test confirmed what I'd always known: my son was mine. This revelation sparked a whirlwind of emotions: relief, anger, betrayal. But one thing became crystal clear: I wasn't going to let David's lies destroy my family any longer. With Karen's support, we planned to confront David together. But as I prepared myself, a chilling thought crossed my mind. If David was capable of all this, what lengths would he go to stop us? The next days were a tense battle of wills. Phone calls went unanswered, texts ignored. Then, the threats started. Anonymous messages warning me to back off, strange cars lurking outside my home, and whispers in the office about a scandal waiting to explode. Despite it all, I refused to retreat. For my son, for my parents, and for the truth. But the real test was yet to come, when family loyalty, greed, and deception collided in a way none of us expected, forcing me to decide what kind of man I wanted to be. After uncovering the truth, I knew the next step was confronting my parents. I drove to their house, the weight of everything pressing down on me like a stone. The old neighborhood looked the same: quiet streets, familiar faces, but inside, everything felt fractured. Mom and Dad answered the door, their faces a mixture of surprise and concern. As I laid everything out: David's betrayal, Karen's ordeal, the fake paternity test, I watched their expressions shift from shock to disbelief. Dad was the first to speak, voice steady but cold. We never wanted to believe he could do something like this. David always seemed like the golden boy, but we've been blind. Mom looked away, tears welling in her eyes. We didn't know how to stop him. We thought we were protecting the family. The truth spilled out: how David had been manipulating everyone, playing the victim to keep control. Their denial, their love for him, had blinded them to the damage he was causing. Dad made a decision that would change everything. David will be cut off. From now on, the inheritance, the family legacy, it's all yours. I felt a mix of relief and guilt. Relief that justice was finally being served, but guilt for the years of silence, for the damage done to all of us. But the family war wasn't over. David, sensing he was losing everything, lashed out. Rumors started spreading, fueled by Mom's lingering sympathy for her son. She secretly tipped him off about the will change, reigniting tensions. Dad's anger boiled over. If you continue this, you'll lose us both. Mom had to choose sides, and the house that once felt like a refuge became a battleground of loyalties and lies. I realized that the greatest challenge wasn't just David. It was the fractured family and the scars left behind. But I was ready to fight for my future, for my son, and for a family rebuilt on truth. The days after that confrontation felt like walking through a storm. My parents' house was no longer the sanctuary I once knew. Every conversation felt like walking on glass. I could see the strain in my mother's eyes, torn between love for her sons and the truth she couldn't deny anymore. Meanwhile, David's world started crumbling. Without the family's financial support, he was forced to face the consequences of his actions. He moved in with Karen and my son, but the tension there was palpable. The man who once thought he could control everything now struggled to keep the pieces from falling apart. I heard whispers from mutual friends and family. Some sided with David out of fear or loyalty. Others began to see the real picture. I wasn't naive. I knew the fight wasn't over. David wasn't just going to roll over and accept defeat. But I also found unexpected allies. My dad, once distant and reserved, became a steady rock. Our weekend lunches turned into long talks about healing, strategy, and the future. Therapy sessions gave me tools to deal with the emotional scars, and slowly, I began reclaiming my life. One afternoon, Dad handed me a folder, legal documents concerning the updated will, signed and notarized. "This is for your protection," he said, eyes sharp. No more games, no more manipulation. The weight of that moment hit me hard. The family fortune, worth millions, was finally mine to claim. But I wasn't interested in wealth alone. I wanted peace, justice, and a chance to rebuild what had been torn apart. Yet, in the shadows, David was plotting. I received cryptic messages, threats thinly veiled as pleas for help. Karen, caught between two worlds, sent mixed signals. The betrayal felt far from over. And then, one night, my phone buzzed with a message that froze me to the core. "You think you've won? This isn't over." Not by a long shot. The war for my family, my legacy, and my sanity was entering its darkest chapter. After that ominous message, a strange silence settled over everything. It was the kind of quiet that feels heavier than any noise, like the world was holding its breath, waiting for the next move. I tried to focus on my new life, rebuilding trust with my dad, improving at work, and most importantly, being the kind of man my son could look up to. But every moment of peace was shadowed by a gnawing uncertainty. David wasn't just going to disappear. Karen was increasingly distant, her texts colder and less frequent. When we spoke, there was a hesitation in her voice, as if she was holding back pieces of a story I wasn't ready to hear. The son I'd raised, the boy I thought was mine, was slowly slipping away in a tangled web of lies and half-truths. I hired a private investigator. I needed to know what David and Karen were really up to. The reports trickled in, late-night meetings, secret calls, financial transfers that didn't add up. The betrayal ran deeper than I imagined. At the same time, family gatherings became battlegrounds. My mother, torn between loyalty and reality, played a dangerous game of diplomacy that pleased no one. My father was firm. No more secrets, no more lies. And then, a breakthrough. The PI uncovered a hidden bank account, one David had opened using my name. Money was disappearing fast, and someone was trying to frame me for financial fraud. The stakes escalated. What started as a personal betrayal was now a full-blown war, one that threatened to destroy everything I'd fought to reclaim. But I was ready. Every scar, every sleepless night, every broken promise had led me here. The final chapter was near, and I was determined to write it on my terms. The discovery of that secret bank account was like a bomb dropped into my already fragile world. David wasn't just trying to steal my family or my dignity. He was trying to destroy my future, brick by brick. I confronted Karen the next time I saw her. Her eyes didn't hold the warmth I once loved. Instead, there was cold calculation, a flicker of guilt buried beneath layers of defiance. "Why?" I asked her, voice barely above a whisper. "Why drag our son into this? Why bring him into a nightmare he never asked for?" She looked away, silent for a long moment. "It's not just about him. It's about David. And you." I realized then that she was trapped too, tangled in David's manipulations, or maybe playing a game all her own. The lines between victim and villain blurred beyond recognition. Meanwhile, my father was ready to take legal action. He'd already revoked David's access to any family assets, but that wasn't enough. This was personal now. My lawyer told me to prepare for a long fight. David had resources, connections, and a nasty streak that made him unpredictable. The nights grew longer, filled with plans, calls, and mounting pressure. I wasn't just fighting for money or status anymore. I was fighting to protect what was left of my family, my son's future, and my own sanity. But every time I thought I had the upper hand, David would strike back. Threatening messages, mysterious phone calls, rumors spread to my colleagues. It felt like a war waged on multiple fronts, and the exhaustion was crushing. Yet, through all this chaos, I found unexpected strength. My dad stood by me, showing a side of himself I hadn't seen before. Fierce, protective, and unwavering. And somewhere deep inside, I knew I wasn't alone. The storm was coming, and the final showdown was inevitable. But this time, I wasn't just defending. I was ready to take back everything he tried to steal. The day of reckoning arrived like a storm breaking over a calm sea, sudden, unstoppable, and full of fury. I stood face to face with David in the lawyer's office, the place where years of lies, betrayal, and broken family ties would finally unravel. He looked nothing like the brother I once knew. The cruel smirk, the arrogance, the venom dripping from his every word. He was the architect of my misery, and now, the last obstacle between me and my life's peace. "Did you really think you could ruin me and walk away?" David sneered, voice cold as ice. "You have no idea what I'm capable of." I looked him in the eye and felt a fire ignite within me. The fire of all the pain, the years of torment, the shattered trust. "I'm done running. This ends today." The court case was brutal. Evidence after evidence laid bare David's schemes, the forged documents, the stolen money, the manipulation of Karen. But the most damning was the paternity test that shattered the illusion of family. Karen's betrayal was exposed to everyone. Her tears and excuses fell flat against the mountain of truth. She had chosen David over me, but even David couldn't escape the consequences of his actions. In the end, the judge ruled decisively. The inheritance was rightfully mine, and David was ordered to pay restitution and face charges for fraud and emotional abuse. The court also granted me full custody of my son, protecting him from the toxic influence of his parents. But more than legal victory, I gained something priceless: my dignity restored, my family's honor defended, and a chance to heal. My father's pride was evident in his eyes, and for the first time in years, my mother stood silently by my side, finally seeing the truth. David was left with nothing but the wreckage of his own making. He had gambled everything on cruelty and lies and lost. As I walked out of that courtroom, holding my son's hand, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The past was behind me, and the future, uncertain but hopeful, stretched wide ahead. No amount of betrayal could break me, because I had fought, survived, and won back what truly mattered. This was my story, a story of pain, betrayal, but above all, resilience. And now, it was time to finally live. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed the story, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new upload. If you have any thoughts about what happened, feel free to share them in the comments. I'd love to hear what you think. Stay safe, stay curious, and see you in the next one.